Hello everyone and welcome back to the Joyful Soul Creates. Charlotte here, and today I'm going to be playing with some mixed media. So I'm starting with a piece of chipboard or cardboard and cutting it with a heart die. I chose this because I feel like it suits mixed media more than normal cardstock does, but of course you could use whatever you prefer. I want this to be red because it's a heart, so it should be red. So I'm colouring it with just some red watercolour paint. This is Gansai Tambi watercolour paints. Acrylics would be more vibrant, but I wasn't sure how that would work with the stamping I want to do on top of this. So I went with the watercolour paints, and I don't mind that it's not super vibrant. I kind of like the muted colour. So I just did a layer of the red on that and dried it with my heat gun, and then I'm going to be adding some detail on top of it. I have a bunch of red rubber stamps. These are from Blank Page Muse, who I was previously on the design team for. I don't actually tend to use rubber stamps a lot, and most of what I own in rubber are from being on this design team. I just prefer clear stamps usually, but I thought these would be fun to play with for this project. So I'm just using a variety of different textures and some different red inks. The Delicata shimmer ink I thought was a bit too intense, so I did use a sponge just to blend that back out a bit and soften it a bit more. And I'm literally just going in with the different stamps and building up the layers and the texture. I will have links for all the products I have used in the description box below if you would like to get any of them for yourself. Once I'd got that initial layer of stamping down, I dried it off again with my heat tool, and then I'm going to be adding some tissue paper for a tissue paper embossing technique, which I found on the Wow embossing powder website. This is actually crepe paper, not tissue paper, so it has some kind of texture in it already. And I'm just putting some craft tacky glue onto one side of my heart, adding the crepe paper and kind of pressing it and pushing it around with my fingers just to enhance that texture even more. And I will add a bit more glue here and there where I think it needs it. I was going to use my scissors to cut away the overhanging piece, but then I decided to tear it off because I feel like mixed media is about not really worrying too much about perfection and kind of embracing the imperfections. I did bring back in my stamps and add a bit more stamping just with the ink that was left on them. And then I'm using a sponge dauber to add embossing ink over that crepe paper, plus I'll add a little bit onto the open portion of the heart as well. And then I'm going to use Wow's Chocolate Caramel Pearl embossing powder. And I was imagining this would come out nearer the kind of reddish brown colour that it is on white, because it's not a super dark colour that I'm working on, but it did actually come out more of the gold colour that it shows up on black. And actually, even though it wasn't what I'd anticipated, I quite like it. So I did decide to go and add a bit more of that ink around the edges of my heart on the open side. And each time I've been putting the embossing powder on, I have been knocking some back just to give it a bit of a distressed look with a paintbrush. I felt like the stamped texture in the background had faded out a bit much, so I thought I would add some more with some other embossing powder. This time I'm using Love from Lizzie's Perfect Plum powder. I don't have very many reddish powders, and I didn't want to be changing up the colours too much, so I thought that would work nicely. And here you can see how it's looking so far. I do really like the texture that crepe paper gave. I wanted to add a little bit more texture, so I put some embossing ink onto the text background stamp, just using clear embossing powder for this one. I actually quite like how it looked without the embossing powder set. I kind of wish I had a sort of translucent white embossing powder. I think that would have been quite interesting to add detail to this. But even so, whilst the text isn't super obvious, it does add something extra to the image. And that's what I've noticed about mixed media when I've watched other people doing mixed media, is it's kind of about building up layers and not worrying too much about everything standing out as individual pieces, but the overall look that you get. So it doesn't matter if some elements disappear into the background because they're enhancing the overall design. Having finished the heart, I'm going to start working on my card base. I like clean and simple, so I do want lots of white space on my design, but I also wanted to add some interest. I saw another card by Kim Dello, who is a YouTuber as well, which had kind of torn pages in the background, and I thought that looked really interesting, and I wanted to do my own take on that. So I've torn down some scrap paper to give me torn edges, and I'm using that as a mask of sorts. I'm stamping my text background into it with Twilight Catherine Pooler ink, and then also ink blending over it with the same ink, just to make the impression of having those book pages without really having them there. I don't really consider myself to be someone who does mixed media, which is kind of silly because really when you boil it down, mixed media literally just means using different mediums. So if you are using coloured pencils to enhance your marker colouring, that's mixed media. But I did want to go more kind of proper mixed media, so to say, with the project for this hop. So that's what I was attempting to do today, and I had a lot of fun with it, even if it did take me quite some time. I think the reason I don't normally do it is because, as I said, I do tend to prefer clean and simple, which doesn't necessarily lend itself to all the layers that mixed media seems to like. There are ways you can do it, and I have seen some really lovely examples out in Blogland and YouTube of clean and simple mixed media designs, and that's what I was trying to create today. So I hope that you think I have done a good job of that. I would love to hear what you think. After I'd finished all my torn page elements, I wanted to add a bit of definition and also kind of shading to them. So I want it almost to look like the card base has been ripped into and you're seeing through the holes in the card base to this text below. In order to do this, I have just a regular pencil. This is a 4B pencil, but I think any pencil would work. And I'm just tracing around the edges of my torn paper pieces. And then I will use a paper stump to soften the line and blend it out and add just that shading to, as I said before, make it look as if that page of text is set just behind the card base. And I will speed up to go through those whilst I tell you a bit about the hop. So this is a mixed media themed hop, not my usual style as I said, but I thought it would be a good challenge and I enjoyed the process. A lot of the hops I've been doing lately have been hashtag driven hops. This one is not a hashtag driven hop, so you do need to make sure to check in the description box below for the link to the next stop on the hop. This hop has been organised by Courtney Krieber through the Handmade Happiness group, and all the participants, I believe, are from that group. You do want to make sure to click on the next link in my description box to hop on to see the next person, because there will be lots of really great mixed media inspiration for you to check out. I haven't yet seen what the other participants have made, but I do know there are lots of very talented YouTubers participating in the hop, so it's going to be a lot of fun, and I will be hopping through myself as well as soon as I have a chance. Once I'd finished adding that shading to my torn paper pieces, I did also take a kneaded eraser just to pick up any of the colour around my pieces, because I want to make sure that's nice and clean to help emphasise that look I was going for, because if there's too much smudging over the edges, it's going to kind of ruin the illusion that I was after. I did add a sentiment which I heat embossed with the same chocolate pearl embossing powder that I'd used on my heart. I made sure to stamp with the VersaFine Onyx Black ink rather than the clear watermark ink, because as I showed at the beginning, the embossing powder does show up differently on light cardstock compared to the darker colours, and I wanted to make sure it was matching my heart. So embossing it on the black meant that it would show up that same kind of goldy colour that I have on the heart, rather than being the more reddish brown colour that it usually shows up on white. Finally, I popped up my heart on foam tape onto my card base, overlapping those faux paper pieces, and that completed my card. card. I hope you enjoyed it and that maybe you learned some new techniques. Do let me know in the comments below what you thought of my first proper attempt at doing mixed media. Remember to click on the link in my description box to go to the next video on the hop. But if you're done hopping, there are a couple of other videos on screen now if you'd like to see more from me. You can also subscribe by clicking the button on screen. Otherwise, I'll thank you very much for watching and I will see you in the next video. Bye!